Stick around to get your small business unstuck. More of Small Business Radio with Barry Moltz, now on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Well, what is it that entrepreneurs need, but no one ever talks about? My next guest is Stephen Myers, who's a 4-time CEO, public speaker, 2-time U.S. Air Force veteran, and best-selling author of the book called Crosswinds, Adventure Entrepreneurship in the Russian Far East. He was also named Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year for Software and Information Services. Steve founded SM&A Inc., which grew into a NASDAQ-listed $110 million annual revenue international management consulting firm serving aerospace and defense. Steve, welcome to the show, and thank you for the service.
Well, thank you, Barry, for having me. It's a joy to speak to your listeners.
So first, how'd you end up being a 2-time U.S. Air Force veteran? You went back?
Can you imagine that? Yes, I served 4 years as an enlisted man. I was a computer repairman in the Air Force, actually. One of the first. Was in the reserves after college. I went back into the Air Force to be a pilot.
Wow. And so how'd you make that decision?
Well, in those days, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I thought my inspired life purpose was to be an astronaut. I loved flying. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a test pilot. I wanted to be an astronaut. I had studied aero and astro at Stanford. Sally Ride was my classmate.
Wow.
I was really excited about doing that, but fate had another plan for me.
So one of the things you talk about that entrepreneurs really need, and certainly you need this to be in the Air Force and to fly or to be a test pilot, is really courage. Where does courage come in for a lot of entrepreneurs? Because people say it takes courage, it takes guts, but what's your definition of courage?
Well, I have a saying that the cornerstone of courage is optimism. So without optimism, we're never going to be able to summon the courage that we're going to need to do the things we need to do to succeed as an entrepreneur, or anything else for that matter. It's pessimism that's the problem. It paralyzes us. It amplifies our fears and makes it impossible for us to move forward. So you're not going to be able to succeed without courage, because entrepreneurship involves risk. You're not going to have all the answers, and you're going to need to have courage to push the button. You're going to have everything on the line, a lot to lose, and doing that is going to require you to push yourself out of your comfort zone.
But how do you have what I call measured optimism, Steve, instead of just blind optimism? Because sometimes entrepreneurs have blind optimism and it gets them in a very bad place. How do you stay realistic yet optimistic?
Well, that's like asking people to change their nature. So I have a name for this. It's called the realist. So I call that a pessimist with a positive attitude.
That's me.
There you go. The answer here is not to expect a natural optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. And I learned long ago that while my optimism is so critical in allowing me to move forward, it can also get me into trouble. And so what I've done as I've built my businesses, I surrounded myself with people who had different natures. I don't want my CFO to be an optimist. I'd prefer they were a pessimist. I'd prefer my chief operating officer was a realist. You see where I'm going with this? You have to build a team. You're not going to be an entrepreneur by yourself for very long. You're going to have to create a team. And you don't want the team to reflect your strength and your weaknesses. You want them to complement your strengths, complement your weaknesses.
One of the other things you also talk about, Steve, is that you have to really connect courage, optimism, and purpose. What's your definition of what purpose is? Is it like you said, my purpose in life you thought was going to be an astronaut, but it ended up being something else?
Well, I think the key is passion. So as we grow up, you find ourselves naturally interested in certain things and uninterested in other things. So I think at some point, you've got to find your purpose in life. Why are you here? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Entrepreneurs can't help themselves but be entrepreneurial. It's in their DNA. And I didn't even realize I was an entrepreneur until I got into my 30s. And it was pointed out to me, how entrepreneurial I was. I'm not even sure I understood the definition of the word. What has to happen at some point in your life if you're going to be successful, and certainly being a successful entrepreneur is something, to be very proud of. But there are many ways to be successful in life. But you're not going to be successful at anything if you don't have passion for it. So I would anchor purpose and passion. What is it that you do that makes you want to get up in the morning and do it? You want to be a singer, you want to be a musician, you want to dance, you love working on machinery, you want to be a pilot, whatever it is that you want to do, don't do it for the money. Do it because you love it.
So, Steve, how did you switch your purpose and your passion? You said that you want to be a test pilot, you want to be an astronaut, but you didn't become that. So how did you redirect that?
Yeah, well, we don't always get our first choice in life. So we need to develop resiliency, all of us. Okay, the people that succeed in life, don't just collapse over the first rejection. They keep at it. What happened was my timing was bad. The Vietnam War come to an end. Massive numbers of spectacular pilots who had served in Vietnam were coming back to the States, and I had to compete with that. There was just no way I was going to get a gig. So I needed to move on and go to plan B, which was, work as an engineer, a systems engineer, a program manager, director of this, a vice president of that. I went from being in the Air Force to 7 years later starting my own company. And in retrospect, it seems inevitable. That 7 years was critical in providing me with the preparation that I needed for what was to come. And I thought I was preparing for something else entirely. That's the way it works.
Yeah, that definitely is the way it works. In your book, you also talk about it's important to, you say, conquer your fear list, put together things you're uncomfortable with and terrify you and do them. I don't really believe that we should try to have no fear. I just think we should be afraid and do it anyways. What do you think?
Conquering fear doesn't mean eliminating fear. There's a wonderful vignette in my book about how I was left for dead at the bottom of a mountain crevasse when I was 20. Really unsurvivable experience. Fantastic read. And I'm not going to tell you I wasn't terrified at the bottom of that crevasse.
How'd you end up there?
Well, that's a long story.
What's the short version? What's the radio interview version?
The short version is don't stand on ledges that collapse. And I fell 30 feet before I hit anything at all. I was left for dead. It was really a survivable situation. 3 days later, I ran into the Rangers on the way up the mountain coming for my body. And the reason that I survived was not that I wasn't afraid. I was terrified. Anyone would be. But I never thought for a moment I wouldn't survive. I just had to keep at it. I just had to keep solving one insurmountable problem after another. Solve enough problems, you get to come home. I think that's a Mark Watney statement from The Martian. So my view is that one of the reasons that I survived was that I was in the military. And one of the first things that happens when you get into the military, you go to basic training, right? And there's a lot of weapons involved in basic training, a lot of discipline, a lot of things going on there that are all about remaking you. But I find the part where everybody remembers this, where they're crawling underneath machine gun fire.
Mm-hmm.
They always show that, right? The guys are crawling along and the drill instructors are shooting machine guns over their heads. What's that all about? Well, it's to get them used to the idea of people shooting at them and without panicking, without becoming paralyzed by fear. That's what that's about. It's not that they don't expect you to be afraid. It's that they expect you to keep moving, keep doing your job, push through the uncertainty of the situation. They start small so that they can identify who are best at this and the ones that are the worst so that they can work on them or get them out.
Steve, the title of your book is Crosswinds, Adventure, Entrepreneurship in the Russian Far East. Tell us about what the inspiration was for the book and the origination of the title.
Well, in 1992, after the end of the Cold War, I became the first American since Charles Lindbergh in 1931. I want you to do that math. I was the first American to fly an aircraft from North America into Far Eastern Russia and down the Kamchatka Peninsula. And there I founded the second Russian-American joint venture, a really incredible story. I wanted to make something akin to the Hudson Bay Company. Just a fantastic story of entrepreneurship, a fantastic aviation adventure.
And so tell us more about that. How'd that come out?
I'm not going to tell you how it came out. I want you to experience what it's like going through the process. So it is a wonderful story of how you use courage to push through uncertainty. Literally every page of the book is a study in how you deal with uncertainty. And, first, just the first part of the book is about just getting there, which, today wouldn't sound like it would be that hard to do. But in 1992 was extraordinarily difficult aviation challenge of the first order, and very risky, very dangerous, huge amount of preparation, and to try to ameliorate all of the risks we could. But there were a lot of unknowns that we'd have to deal with as we went along the way. And then dealing with the Russians and the ambitious plans we had, really quite an amazing entrepreneurial journey. And so the challenge in the book is not to give away how it plays out.
I understand. But you talked about how really success in entrepreneurship is about dealing with the uncertainty. And I always felt that, since I've been in entrepreneurship, almost my entire life, except for the first 10 years of my career, the way that I've dealt with uncertainty is to try to make really small decisions or take really small steps. How did you do it?
Well, I think the key to pushing through uncertainty is not to try and over-control things. Control is an illusion. It is how we, if you will, substitute for fear, right? We think we can create control of things and that's going to solve problems for us. In fact, we control nothing. What is a better approach is to develop a high tolerance for ambiguity and just, in other words, force yourself to not make a decision until you've given yourself a chance to think through particularly unintended consequences. We know what we want to make happen. Okay, but what are the things we're not thinking about that we ought to be? And that's kind of a systems engineering approach to things where you consider alternatives before you jump to a decision. Most people are in way too big a hurry to jump to the first thing, that comes to mind. And that's how they get into trouble, because there's a lot of alternatives they haven't considered.
Right, because they really want to know. They can't just sit with the unknown, the ambiguity. Steve, the last question I want to ask you is, I love the part of the title that says adventure entrepreneurship, because I really feel that every entrepreneurship venture is an adventure. So I love that phrase.
Exactly why it's there. Entrepreneurship is an adventure, and you've got to find joy in the process. If you can't do that, you'll be miserable every step of the way, because the uncertainty is just going to eat you up. You're just not going to have all of the answers. You're going to do the best you can, and every day you're out dealing with the issues du jour.
Steve, I appreciate you joining us. The title of the book is called Crosswinds, Adventure Entrepreneurship in the Russian Far East. Steve, where can people learn more about what you're doing?
Well, my website is stephenmyers.com, and you'll find a lot of fabulous information there. There's some wonderful lectures I've given at the USC Marshall School of Business on entrepreneurship. They'll enjoy watching that. A lot of useful information on how to succeed as an entrepreneur. And I think the book is a great read. They'll enjoy it. They can get it on Amazon, on Audible, or Kindle, or the hard copy, which is filled with a lot of beautiful photographs. So I hope they'll pick it up.
Steve, thanks so much. And thanks for everyone for joining us this week. I got to thank our sponsor, Truly Financial, banking that puts money back into your business. Get a free copy of my new book, Change Masters, how to actually make the changes you already know you need to make by signing up for a free account at www.trulyfinancial.com/Barry. Thanks to our incredible staff, our booking producer, Sarah Shaffrin, our in-studio producer, Lady B, our marketing manager, Courtney Gilchrist. If you're serious about being more successful in 2023, give me a call, 773-837-8250, or email me at barry@moltz.com. Remember, love everyone, trust a few, and paddle your own canoe. Have a profitable and passionate week.
You can find Barry Moltz on the web at barrymoltz.com, or more episodes of Small Business Radio at smallbizradioshow.com.
Prepare for this season by staying hydrated. For anything the season brings, refresh with Smart Water and replenish with Vitamin Water. Find everything you need this season at Walgreens.